Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast. The P.A.S. Report provides an honest analysis on the critical issues that matter to you without the biased media filters. Here's your host, Professor Nicholas Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report Podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano, and I'll tell you, man, this firestorm that's been created because of the Biden classified documents, it has shown no signs of slowing down. The fact is that we keep hearing announcements of new documents being located, and we are now seeing Democrats to turn on the president. As long as this continues, it's going to get worse for him. And one has to wonder if this is a backdoor attempt to push the president not to run for re-election. There are so many layers to this story, and it could ultimately be the president's undoing. As always with politics, so many are missing the irony. Imagine this brings down President Biden after President Biden, the Democrats, the media railed against the former president's handling of classified documents. There are parallels between the two cases, but not many, not in the way you think, because they are very different. And I'm going to peel back the onion, examine the different aspects to this growing scandal, why it matters. As we continue in these extraordinary times, history was made once again. I cannot find another time where we had three special counsels going at the same time. Yes, three. You have the special counsel appointed to investigate former President Trump's handling of classified information. You have the special counsel to investigate the current president's handling of classified information. And don't forget, you still have the John Durham special counsel investigating the origins of the Russian collusion hoax. Not that I expect much to come out of there, but that's three special counsels. And we have to, is anything going to materialize from these special counsels? Well, I'm going to discuss that. Then I'm going to switch gears. I want to get to a story that is completely bizarre. What a strange story. And it's George Santos. Congressman Santos is someone that certainly raised some eyebrows. All the information, all the lies, all the distortions that are coming out are truly amazing. And the fact that the opposition research didn't pick any of this stuff up in the election is really unusual. So I'm going to explain that as well. Before I do, make sure you go to the P.A.S. Report website, PASreport.com. Sign up for the newsletter, subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. If you find the show informative, share it with your family and friends. And let me know what you think. Send feedback to podcast@PASreport.com. Now, jumping right in, when it comes to the Biden classified document scandal, I have to laugh. And I'm not normally a spiteful person, but he deserves everything he's getting. One thing I can't stand about politicians, and I'm talking about most politicians from both the right and the left, I cannot stand the virtue signaling and the self-righteousness. They feign outrage, and then it turns out they are just as guilty as the people they criticize. At this point, it's laughable. They never heard the expression that people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. In any event, the similarities between the Trump case and the Biden case is that they both deal with classified documents. That's where the similarities end. These are two very different cases. There's stark differences. If you listen to the mainstream media, they're saying that Biden's case is different because President Biden is honest. And so it's probably just an honest mistake, that he's a good and decent human being, that President Biden doesn't tell lies. Now, that's laughable. The person that said he drove 10-wheelers and served time in a South African prison when he was on his way to visit Nelson Mandela, he's so honest that he never had a conversation with his son over Hunter's business dealings and the Biden family business. So honest that he was caught plagiarizing when he ran for the presidency in the 1980s. Or what about when he graduated at the top of his class when the truth was that he finished at the bottom of his class in law school? The idea of Joe Biden being honest is a joke.
Come on, give me a break, man.
Some in the media are trying to justify President Biden's actions by saying that his lawyers are the ones that informed the Department of Justice of the classified documents, unlike the former president's team. And I want to touch on that for a minute. These documents are from when Biden was vice president, not president. Now, that is an important distinction. One of the differences between the Trump documents and the Biden documents is that a vice president has no authority to declassify documents, whereas a president does have that authority. Now, whether President Trump actually declassified the documents is something that we're going to find out sooner or later, but as the president, he did have the authority to do so. Vice President Biden did not. And let's take a look at the timeline. According to reports, Biden's team notified the Department of Justice of the documents on November 2nd or 3rd, less than a week before the midterm elections. These documents were at the Penn Biden Center, where the current president was being paid $900,000 a year Exactly for what, I don't know, but that's a whole different story that we need to find more about. The timeline is important here, and you have to follow it. Since these documents were from when he was Vice President of the United States, it means he's been in possession of these documents for at least 6 years. And we need to know, when did his team discover the documents? I highly doubt that these documents were discovered on November 2nd and turned immediately over to the Department of Justice, notifying them about them. I highly doubt that. So how long have they known that they were in possession of these documents? And if they knew about these documents before November 2nd, why didn't they report and turn them over sooner? The next set of questions is, who's vetting these documents? Was it Biden's team that looked at the documents and turned them over to the DOJ? Did they have the clearances to go through these documents? Did they pick and choose what documents to return? Or did they give the Department of Justice and National Archives the entire cache of documents for them to sift through, to determine which one should have been turned over? Well, we know the answer to these questions. Again, some want to compare the situations between President Biden and former President Trump. The Biden scandal more closely resembles Hillary's mishandling of classified information. It's Clinton Redux again, where it was the Clinton lawyers that determined which emails were official, which ones were personal. We know that Hillary's team deleted over 30,000 emails claiming they were personal emails. But how do we know they were personal? Because they were never looked at. They were never turned over to be examined. We are learning that the same thing holds true with President Biden. It's not the FBI or other federal agencies that conducted the searches for classified information. It was not people who routinely deal with or handle classified information. It's not people that have security clearances. It's Biden's legal team. His lawyers are the ones that are going through the documents and deciding which documents should be turned over and which ones shouldn't. Now, where is the FBI raid on President Biden's home and private offices? Where's that raid? Don't you find it a little too coincidental that these documents were found less than a week before the midterms? And think back, everyone was suspecting this massive red wave. Did the Biden officials know about these documents the whole time and only decided to turn them over because they believed that the Republicans are going to uncover these documents in one of their investigations? Remember, when it comes to politics, there are no coincidences, especially when it comes to timing. It's also clear that this is the fourth election cycle where the Department of Justice involved itself, where they may have influenced the outcome of the elections. In 2016, you had obviously Hillary's emails with James Comey coming out there making statements that she committed no crimes and reopening the email server when Anthony Weiner was found to have some of the emails on his computer. You had the famous Russian collusion BS in 2016 going on that also bled into the 2018 midterm elections with Robert Mueller as special counsel investigating Trump-Russian collusion. In 2020, you had the obvious suppression of the Hunter Biden laptop by the media outlets, the 52 former intelligence officials who all had close ties within the government apparatus portraying the laptop story as Russian disinformation. This includes James Baker, heavily involved in the Russian collusion hoax and then went on to serve as the general counsel for Twitter. He's now embroiled in the Twitter files, and it reveals the close coordination between James Baker, the FBI, Twitter, other social media outlets, other government agencies. And now in 2022, the fourth election cycle, we have the Biden documents. Why didn't Attorney General Merrick Garland announce the Biden documents when the Justice Department was made aware of these documents? Why did he wait until 2 months after the midterm elections to make the announcement? Why didn't Attorney General Garland announce a second special counsel when he announced the Trump special counsel? He knew he had these documents, and it seems fair to ask the question, what was he trying to hide? It's also fair to ask whether he would have swept this under the rug had the Republicans not gained the majority in the House. Were they trying to cover this up? Now, I don't know if we'll ever find out the answer to that, but it is something to think about. Then we look at where the initial documents were found, and they were at the University of Pennsylvania's Penn Biden Center. This is another major difference between Trump's documents and Biden's documents. Trump's documents were at Mar-a-Lago. The space where the documents were housed was gated and locked as per the FBI's request. There were cameras in the area. Trump had Secret Service protection. The Trump legal team was in routine contact with both the National Archives and the FBI. Biden's documents were in a closet, an unsecured closet. Certainly wasn't being monitored by cameras or Secret Service. More importantly, we know that since the Penn Biden Center opened, foreign contributions to the University of Pennsylvania tripled. And China accounts for most of the $61 million in foreign donations. While UPenn, they claim, we never sought foreign contributions for the center. We never sought that. Why do you think foreign contributions would triple, especially from China? Do you think it's because China values the education UPenn provides? Do you think it's because China wants to improve higher education in the United States? Or do you think China was trying to buy influence on the UPenn campus? Perhaps they wanted to buy influence into the Penn Biden Center. Which do you think is the most likely reason? I wrote an entire article through Campus Reform that was published in the Daily Wire explaining how colleges and universities have become reliant on foreign monies, how foreign governments and foreign entities provide cash to the campuses to gain influence. And as I stated in the article, China has built out one of the most, if not the most, impressive espionage apparatuses that we've ever seen. From influence to intelligence gathering to transferring technology, they are thoroughly embedded on college campuses. Then we have to look at who worked at the Penn Biden Center. The current Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, Colin Kahl, U.S. Ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, Michael Carpenter, U.S. Deputy Ambassador to the United Nations, Jeffrey Prescott. All these people worked at the Penn Biden Center. Biden appointed UPenn's president, Amy Gutmann, to the ambassadorship of Germany. So they're all serving in the current administration, and yet at the time they were also at the Penn Biden Center. We need to know whether when they were employed at the Penn Biden Center, did they meet with any foreign officials, any foreign businesses, especially from China? If so, who did they meet with? What was the nature or purpose of these meetings? What was discussed in these meetings? Were these meetings reported through proper foreign reporting requirement channels? Were any meetings connected to any Hunter Biden business associates? Again, these are questions that we need to know. We need answers. The other sets of documents were at Biden's Delaware home, but don't worry. These classified documents, some of them were in his garage next to his Corvette. The others were in his mudroom.
Come on, man.
Not for nothing, but when I was a contractor with the federal government, I had to take 3 to 4 refreshers every year on my responsibilities in securing sensitive and classified materials. And I didn't even deal with classified materials. I didn't deal with classified information. However, I would regularly have to certify to the government that the information I was working on was in a secure location with one point of entry and double locked, meaning that if my work was done in my home office, I would have to lock the office door, and then the files I was working on would have to be locked within the locked office door, either in a desk or a lockbox. How much do you want to bet that Biden didn't have that in his garage next to his Corvette? How much you want to bet that he didn't have this in a mudroom within his Delaware home where they found the documents? And here's an interesting little tidbit. Hunter Biden declared the president's home as his residency in 2017 and 2018. He declared that he owned the home. And according to the forms filled out by Hunter Biden, he declared he was paying $49,910 a month in rent in office space. Now, I have no idea whether he's saying the office space was at the home or the office space was at some other location, but the amount of money in rent is staggering and raises a whole host of other questions. Was Hunter Biden lying on these forms? Was the Biden family business money being laundered so that it could be kicked up to the bid guy? These are fair questions. Did these forms really mean anything? They were background checks. I don't know. Did Hunter have access to these documents? We're being told that some of the documents pertain to the Ukraine. Well, what did these documents consist of? These are the documents I'm most interested. Were they part of Hunter's efforts to lobby the government on behalf of foreign entities while his dad was vice president? Again, these are all things that we need to know. And we also need to know who else had access. Now, I'm going to get into that point after a short break. So we're going to talk about who had access to these documents, because what the White House is saying doesn't pass the smell test. We'll be right back. As someone who worked in emergency management, I routinely sounded the alarm bells on our outdated grid system. Think back to 2003 when a tree branch hit a power line in Ohio, shutting down power to the entire eastern seaboard. Around 100 people died, and this was one of the costliest disasters in American history, with losses totaling over $60 billion. Even the White House sees it. They're saying 2/3 of the grid are at least 25 years old, and they recently announced billions of dollars to update it. But we're talking about the government here. How long do you think that's going to take, if at all? When an incident happens, you have to rely on yourself. Be prepared for yourself and your family. With the Patriot Power Generator, you get a solar generator that doesn't install into your house because it's portable. You can take it with you, even use it inside. But it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, and even your fridge. Right now, you can go to 4patriots.com, use code P.A.S. to get 10% off your first purchase on anything in the store, including the Patriot Power Generator. You'll also get their famous guarantee for an entire year after your order, plus free shipping on orders over $97. A portion of every sale is donated to charities who support veterans and their families. Just go to 4patriots.com, use code PAS to get 10% off. That's 4patriots.com, use code PAS to get yours today. Welcome back, and I want to get to the question. When it comes to access, who had access to these documents? And we do have to look at the Trump treatment versus the Biden treatment. We have to look at the locations. We are now learning that or at least the White House is saying, that there are no visitor logs that exist for Biden's Delaware home. And there's no visitor logs for the Penn Biden Center, meaning that anyone could have had access to these documents. We just don't know about it. Now, I'll tell you right now, that is a bunch of nonsense. There is no possible way that the president of the United States, that we don't have a record on who came to his home. The Secret Service is going to run background checks on every single visitor to the house. The Biden Delaware home is monitored 24/7, regardless of whether the president is there or not. I mean, think about it logically. If his house isn't being monitored, what's to say a terrorist doesn't plant a bomb there? It's constantly being surveilled by camera and by human beings. They know everyone who's going on that property and leaving that property. So to say that they don't have visitor logs or there's no record of who visited the home.
Come on, give me a break, man.
Now juxtapose that with Mar-a-Lago, where there are cameras everywhere. There are detailed visitor logs of anyone who enters and leaves the property. There is security at the location, including the Secret Service. Then you have the fact that there was a constant communication between government agencies and the Trump team. And while the former president may have not been cooperative in turning over documents to the National Archives, the National Archives had access to the inventory of these documents. The FBI visited the location. That's a big distinction between the two cases. There are a lot of important questions that need to be answered. As far as the classified documents themselves, too many people are speculating about criminal liability, potential prosecution. I could tell you now, neither Trump nor Biden is going to be prosecuted for mishandling classified information. Even when the Mar-a-Lago raid first happened, I stated then that the former president, he's not going to be charged with mishandling classified information. I still think they're going to indict Trump. I mean, that's obviously the target. And I think that the raid was nothing more than a fishing expedition to try and charge him with something else. But he was never going to be going down because of the mishandling of information and documents. And I believe that more so now. You're not going to charge the former president with mishandling classified information, then not charge the current president with mishandling classified information. It would be like the obvious double standard. You know, and the reason I initially stated that President Trump or former President Trump would never be charged with classified and mishandling classified information is because when you look at so many former officials who did the exact same thing, whether it's former President George W. Bush, former President Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, classified information is routinely mishandled by people at the top. Nothing ever happens to them. All of a sudden, the guardians of democracy and self-righteousness, all of a sudden, they now care about classified documents?
Come on, give me a break, man.
And let's be honest about classified documents. Half the documents shouldn't even be classified. The spooks and bureaucrats, they routinely overclassify documents because they want to hide embarrassing information or they want to cover something up. I mean, do you remember when they redacted and marked former director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe's $70,000 conference table purchase classified? When they redacted that? How many of these documents actually amount to nothing? Probably most, except maybe the Ukraine ones, which, again, those are the ones I really want to see because I do believe there's something there. However, you are not charging the former president or the current president when you have so many examples of other top officials who are guilty of the same exact thing. And this is the part of the problem in the United States. We have this two-tier justice system that exists. You either hold everyone to the same standard or have no standards at all. Why should a rank-and-file person go to jail for the same thing that many of our top officials are guilty of? How is that fair? But if you are a rank-and-file and you did what Biden did, you would be in jail. Justice is supposed to be blind and equal, but it's not. And I can assure you that if the average Joe did what Vice President did, he would already have been charged with a crime. The Trump case, it's a little bit different because he was president of the United States, had the power to declassify documents. Again, we still have no idea whether he declassified it or how he did it. But It is different. However, something else might be going on here. And I think that this probably explains things better than all the other explanations, right? That we may be witnessing an effort from within the Democrat Party and the bureaucracy to push Biden out, to make sure that he doesn't run for reelection. Maybe they believe, and obviously this is speculation on my part, but maybe they believe Biden served his purpose, right? And as the Republican majority takes over the House and launches investigations, maybe they view President Biden as a liability. They know Republicans are going to target the Biden family business. They know that there's a lot there. As the scrutiny on the president's involvement in Hunter Biden's business affairs becomes more intense and apparent, maybe they're worried about the investigations are actually going to show that the current president had far more involvement in Hunter's business affairs than previously acknowledged. See, the whole point of the Mar-a-Lago raid was to damage the former president enough so that a 2024 run would be impossible. Now that Biden has been caught, there's no doubt former President Trump is the big winner. If they try to move against the former president criminally and not the current president, clearly shows that the witch hunt continues. And it would only strengthen the former president's argument that he's being unfairly targeted. Given that the majority of polls show that the American people want fresher, younger faces running in 2024, maybe the deep state believes that both Trump and Biden are damaged enough and so they can move on. Pay attention. You have to pay attention. You are seeing more and more Democrat representatives come out and criticize the current president. The sharks are circling the waters. Remember, in politics, you have no friends. Those closest to you are usually the ones to plunge the knife in your back. Just think back to Emperor Cuomo, who was forced to resign in disgrace. It wasn't because he was resigned in disgrace because he killed old people at nursing homes, because of his March 25th order. He was forced to resign because sexual harassment claims started coming out and the Democrats abandoned them. You know, in the whole Me Too era, Democrats decided that he is a liability now, and so they got rid of him. Well, the same thing may be happening to President Biden. And I would pay very close attention to the statements and moves of people like Governor Gavin Newsom or Vice President Kamala Harris. They have presidential ambitions. They're probably drooling at the mouths right now, drooling about the prospect of President Biden potentially not running for re-election. It seems that this story is getting bigger and bigger, and the actual mainstream press is covering it. So there is something there. And we're going to have to watch to see how this plays out. Now, I suspect if President Biden announces that he's not going to run for re-election, you're going to slowly see this story go away in the mainstream media. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And switching gears, I want to turn my attention towards Congressman George Santos. Now, it's not really switching gears because it goes back to who are the people representing us? Who are the people that we are putting into these offices? Do they have integrity? And a few months ago, I interviewed then candidate Santos on this podcast. And in full disclosure, I've met Santos several times. Throughout all of my interactions with him, I found him to be engaging. He was good-humored, affable. He was someone who seemed passionate, dedicated, and he talked a good game. Obviously, he talked a good game. But it appears a lot of us was completely fooled. It's one thing when someone tries to embellish a little on their resume when they're job hunting or running for public office, when they exaggerate some of the things that they did. However, this goes far beyond embellishment. I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to justify embellishing or exaggerating. I'm just saying that's part of the game. George Santos, the real George Santos, is a mystery. We actually have no idea who he really is. It turns out that every little thing, every aspect about his life was a complete lie. There are reports that he may have engaged in criminal activities, whether it's running a Ponzi scheme or some type of campaign finance violations. There are now a number of investigations going on, and the walls may be closing in on him. And I will tell you that I find this case really fascinating. It's not that it was a few white lies. We are talking about creating a life that did not exist. Where the hell was the Republican Party when it came to vetting their candidate? I mean, all of this should have been uncovered during the internal vetting process, but that's where we know the GOP is terrible, and it's why the GOP doesn't always attract the best candidates. See, there's a dirty little secret in politics, and it happens in both Democratic circles and Republican circles. They don't vet their candidates. They don't care. As long as you kiss the ring of the party bosses and you can raise money for the political party, that's all that matters. It's not about accomplishments, competence, or convictions. It's about fundraising abilities. The more money you can raise, the more likely the party bosses will select you to be the candidate. It is a deeply corrupt process. And that's how Santos was able to get the blessings from the party bosses, the same party bosses who are now calling on him to resign. They should admit their culpability in this. Had they done their job, Santos wouldn't have become the nominee in both 2020 and 2022. Remember, this guy ran for Congress twice. And it's not that difficult to verify employment records, get transcripts from college. That's not hard to do. Could have been done in about 15 minutes. It's not difficult to uncover financial discrepancies. The local, state, national GOP should have done this, and they didn't. They failed. But the next question is, where was the media and the Democrat Party? And this is what makes it so interesting. All the information coming out is so easily verifiable. What did the media and the Democrat Party know about Santos, especially considering that this was a competitive district and that Santos came close to winning in 2020? You would think that the Democrats would have done their opposition research into Santos in 2020, but even more so in 2022, given how close the 2020 election was. It's not like this is some hardcore Republican district where Democrats didn't have a shot. It was a district that Democrats held. And one should ask the Democrat Party to release the opposition research they have on Santos, because I find it really odd that the Democrats didn't unearth this stuff that we're learning about today. It's unheard of. Don't you find it interesting that none of this information came out as Santos spent 4 years running for Congress, but 3 weeks after he's elected, all of a sudden all this information's coming out. The floodgates open. They start discovering all these lies that Santos told. So for 4 years, they didn't know any of this stuff. But all of a sudden, 3 weeks after an election, now they find all this out. Campaign finance forms were filed in 2020 and 2022. Do you mean to tell me that no one looked at the forms from the 2020 election cycle? Nobody looked at the forms from the 2022 election cycle? We're now learning about ties to Russian oligarchs potentially. And we all know that when it comes to all things Russia, the Democrats love to paint Republicans as Russian assets. You're telling me that if George Santos is connected to Russian oligarchs, Democrats wouldn't say anything? That they were unaware of this? Something doesn't smell right here. Something does not smell right. It stinks. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe it's a Democrat plan. Maybe Democrats felt that they were going to lose anyway in 2022, so they wanted this to hang around the Republicans' neck. I don't know. All I do know is that Santos needs to go. It's as simple as that. And if he committed any crimes, he should be prosecuted. Like I said, I met him, always a nice guy, but standards matter. And we need one standard in place. When it comes to any officials, I don't care if they're elected or appointed, we need people with integrity. This is part of the problem in the United States. This is why we're in the predicament that we're in, is because of the lack of integrity out there. There are some who want to defend Santos staying in office. They don't defend what he did, but they try and justify it. They point to Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, and they say, you know, she used Native Americans to advance her career, even though she has no Native American blood in her. They point to Senator Blumenthal, who's a snake and needs to go, and I'll get into him in a second. But they point to how Blumenthal lied about his service in Vietnam. And I get it. They are frauds too. But just because they're staying, it doesn't absolve or justify Santos staying in the House. And the longer Santos stays, the more he becomes an albatross around the necks of Republicans. Democrats would love for Santos to stay because it gives them ammunition. We have to stand for something. We need people of integrity representing us. Santos deceived and betrayed all his constituents. All those people that supported him. All those people that volunteered for him and worked hard day in, day out to get him elected. And that's why he needs to go. Now, with that being said, we also need to see Congressman Schiff and Senator Blumenthal go as well. As the Twitter files reveal, these two use their positions of power to pressure Twitter to discredit anyone who pushed the Russian collusion narrative, pressure anyone who called the Russian collusion narrative a hoax, to censor those posts, to dismiss those posts, to dismiss Devin Nunes when he was a congressman, when he was covering all the lies and distortions. They wanted him censored. Santos, he's a snake. He deceived his constituents. But these two actively damaged the United States as a whole by pushing false narratives and abusing their power, increasing the division of the United States. They should pay the piper as well. And while members of Congress do have congressional immunity under Article 1, Section 6 of the United States Constitution, I do believe that Congressman Schiff and Senator Blumenthal may have violated the law by using their offices to try and pressure Twitter to target political opponents. It's at least a constitutional question that's worth bringing up. You know, it amazes me. With all the good and decent people in the United States, why is it that some of the biggest scumbags are the ones in office? Why is it that the American people can constantly elect and re-elect these people? And it's a question I wish everyone would ask themselves. Now, I hope you found the contents of this episode informative. Please leave the P.A.S. report a 5-star rating and take 30 seconds to write a good review on any podcast platform that allows it. Share this episode with your family and friends and on social media. I want to thank you for joining me today. I'll be back on Monday with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report Weekly Roundup Podcast.
Have a good one. Bye.
Be sure to rate, share, and subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Also, visit PASreport.com and follow us on Twitter at PAS Report.